Okay, I'm disconnected. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Saturday. And I'm just going to get Jade here. Hope you're ready to get the ball rolling and build a startup in the next 24 hours plus. We're going to do a short workshop this morning and review some of the pieces we talked about yesterday for day 2, emphasizing some of the things that your team is going to be working on today. There are master classes that we want to point you to, and these are posted in Discord in the resource channel along with other helpful tools. So we recommend you watching these as a team. And we're not going to go through these classes in total now, but we'll point you to some of the key points. So just want to say a few notes about team formation. So by now you should be in a team. And if you're still looking, if that's not the case and you're still looking for a team or your team looking for additional people, we need to get this sorted out right away because the mentors meetings are starting very soon. So remember that as a team, you can go into the channel I Need a Team, and you can find people there that are looking for team members. And if you don't already have a team, you can find teams that are partially formed there as well, or teams that may be looking for more members. You can also find a list of teams that are posted in announcements, and perhaps they're still looking for more people. So we encourage you now to find a team. If you're still have an idea and your team is at 4 people, maybe 3 people, perhaps it's time to drop that idea and then move to another team. So looking at Saturday and what the Saturday schedule is. Saturday is the first half is really focused on validation, and the second half is focused on prototypes, developing your business model. And by this time, you should have already thought about delegation, and between your team members, find out who's good at what or who's interested in what task and start to delegate. So we're going to go through some of the key points today around validation, developing your prototype, and defining your business model. So day 2 is really all about learning from the mentors. So make sure that you sign up for mentors. There's the slots. So the masterclass videos are posted in Discord in the resource channel, along with other helpful tools. And we recommend that you watch those as a team and then discuss how you're going to use those to get work done. So one of the first master classes is building the lean canvas. So this is how you use a visual aid. For those of you who are not familiar with the lean canvas or haven't used it before, it's essentially a tool with 9 squares that lay out the essential elements of your business model. So it's a very visual way to think of your business model with the key pieces that you need to think about. So you want to get ready to use that business model canvas. You can actually make a big canvas for your team and put it and start to work virtually. And I'm sending you some links on how you can create a virtual lean canvas. So this is a powerful tool. It's going to help guide you through the elements, and it's also a key part of using the business model canvas is validation. And so this is where you take your idea from being a hypothesis or a hunch to actually getting data or more information from customers and validating. So in this way, it's evidence-based. And we use that business model canvas to de-risk your business model based on the evidence that you collect. So just in terms of some terminology, the business model is, we've mentioned it a few times, where you're about to see the visual here and certainly in the video, but it is a method to capture the key elements of your business and in a more intuitive manner. And so it's introduced in the video, but we'll review some of the key pieces of that and how to use the canvas and how to use it effectively in your team. Another term that we talked about yesterday was the value proposition. And understanding the value proposition is really central to your business model. It is the heart of your business and your venture. And this is really understanding how you create value for your customers. It's very much linked to the problem that you're solving or you're addressing. And that is how you create value. If you are solving a problem or addressing a need for your customers, you are creating value for them. And the more you have a deep understanding of that value or your value proposition, the greater you understand your business and how you will deliver that value to your customers. You may have an assumption of what your value proposition is at the outset or on day one, and when you first start out, but the only way you'll gain a deeper knowledge of really understanding this value is by talking to your customers and understanding how they are addressing the problem now. How big is this problem for your customers? In what way is it a problem? What are they currently using to solve the problem? And that's where you will understand what your business is and how it will create value for your customers, and also how you distinguish yourself from what's already available on the market. Another term that we talked about yesterday, the minimum viable product. And one of the easiest ways to think about the minimum viable product is to think of this as an experiment. So you're using a rudimentary early stage tool to gather data or information from your customer. Remember that your team does not have to have a complete final product developed, but you can think of the minimum viable product could even be something that you would test with your customers, you would put in front of your customers. It could be a schematic or a diagram of what you're thinking about. It could be as simple as, in the very beginning, a set of survey questions where you're gathering information. But as you evolve through the weekend, you want to get closer and closer to really understanding the features of your product and what it will look like. So it's really a way to test and gather information. Other terminology and vocabulary. So I included this slide, but these are some of the key terms that you should become familiar with, and especially as you develop your pitch and your team is conveying that you have knowledge of these terms in your pitch for tomorrow. Just a reminder that the pitch is a 3-minute pitch, and it's the pitch that the judges are going to be looking at. So you want to make sure that you're conversant in these terms. So now the business model canvas. We'll have a look at the visual. I've got a copy of a canvas in yellow with some questions embedded in it. You'll see that it has 9 key squares in this one. This is the Ash Mariah canvas. I'm going to give you a link to Strategizer where you can find the virtual version of this. And in the virtual version, you can actually add sticky notes, and your team can keep adding to this canvas as you go through the weekend. And you'll see the squares are numbered from 1 to 9. The size of the square is really illustrative of how important that element is to your business. And you'll see, excuse me, that the number 1 square is the value proposition. So it is central to your business and understanding that well. And it is really understanding what are the features of your product. But before you even get there, you need to understand what problem are you solving, and what is your competitive advantage, and how do you separate yourself from what's already available on the market, which is all part of understanding the value that you create. And then square number 2 is the customer segments. And we're going to talk about these two first and foremost. These are essential to the canvas and understanding the fit between square 1 and square 2, understanding the fit between the value you're creating and the value proposition, as well as the customers. Who are the customers? What is your customer segment? Who are the most likely early adopters? Who are the later adopters? And the greater that you can understand those customers and their archetype and the fit between that and your value proposition, the better. We call this problem solution fit. And then later, there's another type of fit that once you start to fill in, have a better understanding of the value proposition and your customers, and you start to launch something in the early stages in the market, we call this product market fit. And I'm going to talk about the value proposition canvas coming up next, which really illustrates how you can work together as a team, tracking the information that you're getting and create that fit between those two. Just before we leave the business model canvas, I want to talk about the other squares. You don't necessarily have to do them in order from 1 to 9. But when you look at the other square, the squares on the right-hand side of the canvas, they're mostly related to the demand side, understanding how you're going to make revenue, how you're going to get your product out to the market, and how you're going to grow your customer base. So these are also things that you should be thinking about this weekend. And of course, square 9, which is last but not least, you always have to be having a sense of cost. In other words, is this idea of yours going to make money? And you don't have to have an exact estimate of those costs, but you should understand some best guesses as to what it's going to cost you to get this product into the market, and also what your revenue model is going to be. How are you going to make money? And these are the key elements of the business model canvas, very essential for you to be working on during the weekend. And this is, as you remember, one of the criteria that the judges will be looking at. The second business model canvas is kind of a simpler, more fun way to think about that canvas. And it's really breaking it down as to what will you do and for whom, who are the customers, will you make money? So it's a sort of simpler way to think about it. But again, I would make sure that you don't skip any of these squares and that you're understanding all of them. To go along with the business model canvas, there's another canvas called the value proposition canvas. Some of you may have already heard of this or you're already using it. But the way to think about this, think of the circle as being your customers and the information you want to find out from your customers, and the square being the value proposition. So remember in the business model canvas where we said you had to have a fit between the value proposition and the customers, this canvas is really drilling down on that, and it's going to help you find that fit. So if you look at the circle, this is sort of where you begin with the circle and understanding your customers. And it's really understanding their jobs, whether you're providing a service or product for a business. You need to think about what are they trying to get done, or whether it's for an individual. The same thing applies. Think of an individual customer as having jobs and trying to, what are they trying to do? And in other words, what related to your problem that you're addressing. And then the other two sections of that circle are their pains and the gains. So the jobs are something that you should be drilling down on when you do your research with your customers, and find out more information about that from them about what it is that they would like to get done. And then moving to the pains, what's standing in the way, what's preventing them from achieving these jobs. And the more you can tease this out, the better. And then gains, it's from their perspective, from your customers' perspective, what would they gain if they could overcome these pains? And each of these elements, these three segments in the circle, are really going to give you great insight into the value proposition. So in this canvas, you're working right to left. You're starting with the circle, finding information out from your customers, and then moving over to the value proposition. And in the value proposition square, most people want to go directly to the left and look at the features, that little triangle on the left. And that's actually the last thing that you do. You want to take insight from your research in talking to your customers from the circle, and then look at the kinds of pain relievers or gain creators that your product could solve. Remember, you don't have to solve all of the pains for your customer, but you can think about which ones could you address, and how could you create benefits or gains for your customer. Your customer may not even realize how many gains or benefits that you can provide. So there may be more that you can provide than your customer has even identified, and sometimes that's the case. And then those two squares, your pain relievers and your gain creators, are then going to help you understand the feature set of the product that you're going to build. And that's important. This way, by the time that you present your idea on Sunday, you will have gathered information and it's evidence-based. So when you're talking about the feature set, you will be able to say, we talked to our customers, and again, we're looking for, you should aim, if you can, to speak to 30 over the weekend, reach out, and perhaps you can even do more. This is where you have to be quite inventive with your team, how you're going to reach the customers, but you can certainly use methods such as Zoom and other techniques to do a call or a conversation. And as in these times, in the middle of COVID, we're all becoming much more proficient in using these tools. So as an example, there's an example here where the team has done some research. They figured out what the jobs were, what the pains were from the customers, and they were in sticky notes. And then that actually helps them fill in the pain relievers and the gain creators to finally figure out what's the feature set, and that helps you figure out what are the distinguishing features of the product that we're building. This is another canvas. It's very, very similar. We're presenting it here because in the video that you'll watch, you'll also see this canvas. It was developed by Ash Mariah. It's a very, it has similar squares. It lays out the problem over here in square one. It still has the value proposition in the middle and the customer segments, but this one allows you to track your problem. And we're introducing this not to confuse you, but some of you may prefer to use this canvas. Either one works. They're both just tools to help you track information that you gather over the weekend. I've also, on the next slide, provided some links where you can find the digital version of both of these canvases. So you can go to Strategizer on the first link and find both the Osterwilder canvas and the value proposition canvas that I showed you. You can create versions of this where you can work on it remotely and collectively, and really encourage you to do so. And also there's a link there for the Ash Mariah canvas. The second masterclass that we want you to work on is the next slide, and that is understanding your customers. And so one of your tasks this weekend is to first understand what the problem is and not the solution. So remember, don't jump to the solution. Take the time to really understand the problem. And that's what you're going to see highlighted in this video. And this means knowing and understanding the problem from your market and from your customer's viewpoint, not from your viewpoint. So what the problem is going to look like, you're going to learn from them. You want to be open-minded. You're going to be building a solution to meet their needs from that point of view. So this will help you learn what questions to ask and to understand how to build the right product for those customers. Just going through a few validation tips, and this is to supplement what's in that video. So first of all, you want to define the problem. You want to do research and validate, and then you want to start building and evaluate and iterate. So you can think of it being a stepwise process that you're going to be undertaking this weekend. And we can sort of talk about each of those in turn. So the problem is taking what you believe initially, your proposed belief, and that's usually based on limited evidence that you're going to move forward with. And you want to gather information from your customer to have a deeper understanding. And we talked about this yesterday, as it being so important. And it's also, remember, one of the judges' criteria, the problem that you're working on should be related to COVID-19. And gathering data and information, it's really in two steps. So the first one is understanding the problem. And the next step here, we can think of step two, is the research that you will undertake. And this is, in a sense, de-risking your business model. So remember, the research that you're going to undertake is not just market-based research or research on the problem or existing research that's already out there that's been published, or research on the market size, the number of companies in the market, your competitors, who they are, what they're doing. You also need to do your own primary research with your potential customers. And so you want to interview prospects who may be experiencing the problem, and you're going to think about what questions you need to ask them. So use the value proposition canvas to help you identify 10 questions. These questions should be very open-ended to allow them to open-ended questions to allow them to answer it in an unbiased way. And so we're now on the slide talking about step two, research. So I'm just going to get Jade to advance the slide to step 2 on research. And this is where, before you go and interview, you're going to think about the questions that you're going to ask, and survey questions where people answer yes or no, or fill in fixed numbers such as their age and how often they experience the problem are great for your initial sort of scoop on terms of finding out information about the problem. But you're going to want to follow up those questions with more in-depth questions that are open-ended, and try to elicit storytelling from your customers. Let them tell you how they experienced the problem. Perhaps ask them about the last time they experienced the problem, and then what they did to solve the problem, and what was missing from that solution. And that's going to give you even more insight as to what pains they have right now in addressing that problem or that need. In other words, what's missing in the market, or what doesn't exist, or what would make their life easier. And you want to hear that from their words. That's much more powerful. And again, it's this evidence-based decision making that you're going to be making that will help inform what your product looks like, what the features are, and as you begin to build your prototype. If we go on to the second part of the next slide of step 2 is getting them to tell you about examples. So tell me about how you managed the problem, or explain to me the last time you experienced the problem. And the difference here is that you're going to be getting this evidence from your customers' point of view. And that's what makes your value proposition very, very powerful. Remember to be open-minded. These open-ended questions force you to be open-minded, and because we all bring our biases with us as we go into a problem, we think we understand it, but it's much better if we can understand it by walking through their shoes. On the next slide, we look at things not to do and things to do. So the do's, make sure you use techniques that we are all using now that we're staying at home, whether it's the phone, whether it's Skype, email, contacting people through LinkedIn, finding out who your customers are, excuse me, and try your best to do face-to-face if you can. Have somebody on your team take notes. So it's always better not to do this on your own if you can. Have at least 2 team members doing this. Track the responses and understand how many people said what, because you're going to want to capture these responses and do some sense making from them. Excuse me. Don'ts. So lots of things to avoid. Sorry about that. So try not to assume anything. Try to check your assumptions before you start doing the research. Keep an open mind, and don't have leading questions where you're leading the person to give you the answer you think you want to hear. Talk a little bit about what you're thinking about developing, but not too much, only enough to give them a sense of what you're working on. You certainly do not need to divulge any secrets or codes or anything. In fact, it's better if you don't talk too much about what it is that you're building, and you want to draw the customer out and let them do the talking. Ask questions about the future and what they could potentially use, what would help them. And you can certainly rely on online surveys. And at the end of those surveys, you can always ask the question, would it be okay if we followed up with you in a call or a Zoom call? Okay, step 3 on the next slide is where you start to build. So one of the things that your team will be working on this weekend is developing the minimum viable product. And again, we've walked through the definition of that. Once again, to reiterate, you're not expected to develop your full final product. However, you want to get to the point where you can convey to the judges what it is you're thinking of building, what it looks like, what are the features, and that's based on the data and information that you will be gathering. Your minimum viable product at the end of the day will lead you to helping you develop a sort of functional prototype. And remember that that prototype does not have to be fully built, but it's something that you can put in front of the judges in your video to show them how it will work. So maybe you've got a wireframe instead of developing the full web page or app. Maybe you've got a schematic and a diagram to show how your system will work. Or if there's delivery, then how does that work? So making sure that when you present your final product, that you've got something that is based on evidence that you've gathered and that it's quite clear how it's going to work. Okay, and the next slide, this process of gathering information is iterative. So you don't stop once you sort of have that series of questions. You want to then follow up, take what you learned in one round of interviews with customers, fold that into what you're developing, and then you can have a chance to go back, maybe follow up with the same people or new people and say, this is what we're thinking of. Would this work? How would it work? Would it be useful to you? And remember, if somebody tells you that no, it's not useful, you don't want to just end there. You want to ask them why. So that's a very good question. Comes from design thinking. Ask why once, ask why again, and ask why 3 times. In other words, the question why is one where you start to get your customer to explain to you in their own words why they would not love your product. And from there, you will also get some information about how you could even make it better. Okay, so that's kind of an overview to go with the video, understanding your customers. The pitch deck, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And again, there's a masterclass on the pitch deck. So one of the things it's important is to create a story flow. And remember, when you create your video, you're telling a story. You have 3 minutes to tell your story, and it's really important that there's a flow. So I'm going to just go through these slides. These are suggested. This is the suggested story flow. By all means, you do not have to follow it exactly, but it's one that's been tried and true, tested, and used again and again that will help you create that story. So the elements of the story are the problem and helping people visualize. Let the listener or the audience help them understand the problem, what it is, and do it very succinctly. The solution, the market, who's in the market, so the competition, your product. So what does your product look like? Sales and monetization. Also, come up with, make sure you show your team and what you've been able to accomplish this weekend. So the slides, we'll go through and highlight these slides. So what is the problem? How big is it? And in order to convey this, try to use visual aids. Remember, you're telling a story, so you don't need a lot of words. You could use an image with some numbers to help them understand how many people are suffering from this problem. You could tell a story, you could show a visual of a potential customer or an archetype of a customer and tell their story. As an example, you could use imagery to help explain, help the listener understand and define the problem. And you're telling that story, conveying that image in a very succinct manner. Don't forget to talk about your competition. So the next slide that we have in the deck, we'll have a look at the competition. And don't forget to talk about the competition. A lot of times people are afraid to talk about the competition, or they don't want to mention that somebody's already in the market and doing something similar. Don't avoid that. One of the worst things you can do is say that you have no competition if, in fact, there are people in the market offering something very similar. And one of the good things about having people in the market, it means that there's already a market for what it is that you're building and what you're trying to do. So you're going to help the audience understand the nature of the market, how big is the market, the fact that there is a market already existing. It also shows that you as a team understand and appreciate your competition, that you have an understanding of who the players are in the market. It also provides something else that's very important. It provides you with an opportunity to differentiate yourself from your competition. And it's fair game to say, these players are in the market, but nobody is doing this, or this is how we differentiate ourselves from them. So it's really a way to showcase your competitive advantage. And in the next slide, just showing a diagrammatic of a matrix, so a competitive matrix. And this is one way to have a visual aid. Sometimes this is easier to just put an icon of your competitors down the left-hand side, or the company names, and then across the top of that matrix are the features. And so you'll see the check marks. This is often done in presentations. This may or may not be useful to you, depending on your product and your market, but it shows who the key players are, the key competitors, and the features that are across the top. You're going to show that here's what's missing, but here's what we do. So you're checking all the boxes for your company, but the other companies are not offering these features. This helps you lay out that competitive advantage that you have. And it's a nice way to show two things at once. You understand your competitors and then what they're not doing. And this is particularly useful if this is something that you can easily do, or you have a competitive advantage that's going to be more difficult for your competitors to follow suit. Next thing are introducing your solution. And so the next part of your pitch, once you've laid out the problem and the market, you can now talk about the solution. And so we look at the next slide to introduce the solution. So you've, and I'll just get Jade to advance the slide. And I don't know, Jade, if you're there, if you can advance the slide. And there we go. 3 steps to introduce your solution. And so now that you've laid out the problem that you're solving and the size of the market, who's in the market, your competition, this is your chance to show what it is that you're that you're developing, and you want to help people understand what your solution is. Sometimes this is referred to as the demo part of your pitch. And so there's several different ways of introducing it. So you can have a slide after you do your competitive analysis of who else is in the market. So a lot of times people say, we are such and we provide this. So there you have your mission, your tagline, and you could very quickly then go on to the next slide, which then begins your demo. And remember that a visual can speak 1,000 words. And so there's no need for you to go into a lot of detail of all the ins and outs of how you built it. You just really want people to understand how it works and what it does. And again, this can be done even with a diagram or a schematic, and it conveys to the audience how it will work. And next slide, Jade. So you want to show how your product works. And again, it's better to not try to do anything. You're going to be creating a video, so you don't have to worry about anything live, because as luck will always have it, when you're trying to do demo something live, it often doesn't work. So you have the advantage of doing it in a video. But you could use a diagram to show how it works. You could use visuals. You could take a picture. You could have wireframe. You could do a mock-up of your product. Could be a website or an app that goes with it. And this is where you help people understand what it is and how it works. And remember that you can really highlight the features that make up your solution, and help the audience understand what is unique or innovative about your product or solution, and how is it different from what exists in the market. The next slide is marketing. And this is where you're going to put together research that you gathered over the weekend. So show that you understand what your customers told you, show the evidence base, show the validation, and remember that validation is one of the judges' criteria. So you're going to want to have a slide that shows what you learned from your customers. You can also show how large the market is, how many people are in the market, and that also shows how big is this opportunity. And you can also think about how will you enter the market. So what is your plan? Who are your early adopters? Which customer segment are you going to roll this out to first? And is there a timeline? In other words, are you going to have milestones? Where do you want to be a year from now, 6 months from now, or even 2 years from now? What do you plan to do, and how do you plan to launch this into the market? And sales and money is the next slide. So how are you going to make money? And this is where you highlight the revenue, if you've got a price for your product, what's your growth strategy, and how is your product going to be making money. You can also talk about the achievements of the team. What challenges did you face, and what are your next steps and goals? You should also have a slide on your team, and I'm seeing, Jade, that the slide is a blank. Can you advance to the team slide? You want to highlight your team members. This is an opportunity that you can showcase your team. What's usually done is you have just a headshot of each team member, and you don't have to put all of their credentials. Oftentimes it's helpful to talk about what their expertise is in one word. coder, developer, engineer. You don't have to worry about giving everybody a title such as CEO and president at this stage. So try not to do that. You can also identify additional people that you need on your team that you didn't have this weekend in order to launch the company. And the benefit of that is, A, it shows that you're very serious about this, that you'd like to move it forward, and that you've already taken the time to identify the additional people or resources that you need, additional talent that you'll be looking for. And it shows that you're aware of what it's going to take to launch this product into the market, and that you've already identified what you need. So kudos to you for doing that. Next slide, conclusion. And remember, people always forget about the last slide, but I always like to remind people this is the last thing that you want your audience to see or remember. And this is where you can leave a key message. It could be a tagline, it could be your mission, it could be your passion, it could be what you can have your logo there, if you created a Twitter account, and the purpose of your company. And this can also be important because it conveys that passion and the commitment of your team. So these are a suggested set of slides. 2 more master classes that I want to highlight. So the next slide is the workshop, Understand Category Design. So this is one that we really recommend that you also watch as a team. And this is learn how to create and dominate markets in any industry and define your space. So it features thought leaders from category design, advisors, and you'll also see some of the co-editors from Play Bigger. And they'll talk about how you can use strategic category design to rise above the industry crowd and find new spaces and opportunities. So it's something that you can certainly think about after Startup Weekend, but it's also something that you can weave into your presentation this week to show that you've thought about how you do separate yourself from what's already available in the market. And the next slide is a masterclass on the pitch. And so the pitch is really your moment to shine at the end of this weekend. And you want to inform, you want to entertain, you want to educate your audience, and your communication is going to be reinforcing the work that you did this weekend, the belief that you have in your product idea, your company, and moving it forward. And you want to de-risk your business venture by folding in all of the validation that you were able to do over the course of the weekend. And that for at any stage of a startup, and certainly for anybody that's looking at investing, that sort of de-risk, high return, value, big value proposition, deep understanding of the problem. And some of you over the course of the weekend may even get commitment from some of your early adopters. And if you do, by all means, make sure that you fold that into your pitch, because that is the ultimate validation. Some of you may even get customers who will prepay for your product or your service. So make sure you fold that in your story when you talk about validation. So you need to show your audience that your data supports your work and that you're the right team for the job. And so this is a great master class. So we encourage you to watch that. And that is it for the Saturday workshop. These slides will also be posted on the resource channel. I'm sorry if some of the slides came up blank. I just noticed that. So hopefully these are going to be very useful to you, and make sure that you watch the masterclass as a team. Thank you very much, and I'll connect later with you during the day. And have a great day. Bye-bye.